Hello everyone, this is Fadi, and with me here in studio is Dr. J. Smith, and today we are going to capitalize now on the topic we shared with you last time concerning the 5 different canons according to the book or at least the research of Dr. Shadi Nasser. Today we're going to begin to focus on the different problems associated with these canons. And of course, no better than Dr. J. Smith, who can unpack these problems for us. Dr. J, thank you so much, as always, for being here with us. We mentioned these 5 canons last time. So what are these different problems that we can now focus on as it applies to each one of them?
Yeah, Dr. Shadi Nasser goes through these 5 different canons. What I like to do is take each one after another, and let's start with the first canonization. And to do that, we need to go back to the 7th century. Let's look at the slide, and we have to go back to what we know about how this canon was put together. And this is all from Sahih Bukhari, volume 6, book number 61, hadith number 510. You can start with hadith number 509 to talk about Abu Bakr's. We're now in the mid-7th century, 652, where he's talking about Uthman's canon. So this is Uthman's canon in Al-Bukhari. And when you look at, I don't want to read it all, you have it there in the Arabic, you have the English rendition. Let's just summarize what's happening here, what it's telling us. Right. What it's telling us is that there was another battle. Remember the first battle of Yamama in 632 right. is why they had to put the first Quran together. Now you have a second battle. This is happening up in Azerbaijan, and you're having a lot of the Medinans from Mecca and Medina who are from the Hijaz. They're going up to Azerbaijan to fight against the Azerbaijanis. They're joined by those from Iraq and others from Syria.
Right.
And they're all together, and after the fight is finished, they go into the mosque to do their prayers. And as they're doing the prayers, these Hijazi Muslims hear the Quran being recited in other dialects or other languages, and they're quite upset. Hudayfa, who's the leader, comes bittering all the way back down to Medina. He's absolutely angered by what he's heard. They even went to blows. They were fisticuffing each other because of what they were hearing. And he comes to Uthman and he says to Uthman, we've got to do something about this. You can't have all these different Qurans. We must not be like the Christians and Jews who supposedly have different Bibles. We've got to just have one Quran. So they've gone up north, right, and they've heard an awful lot of different Qurans being recited in the north. Now they've come back down to the Hijaz. There's the north-south again. So Uthman agrees. Okay, we'll put it in the Qurayshi dialect. This is the dialect that Muhammad would have known. And so he decides to get Zayd ibn Thabit, the secretary of Muhammad, who had written the earlier Quran for Abu Bakr.
That's right.
Which was given to Abu Bakr, who then gave it to Umar, who then gave it to his daughter, Hafsa, who had been a wife of Muhammad, and she puts it under her bed for 20 years. Kind of inept to leave it there for 20 years. Had she kept that out and had Abu Bakr done his job, of course, there would be no problem with all these different Qurans. Right? But so Uthman does what Abu Bakr should have done, and he then has Zayd ibn Thabit to write it in the Qurayshi dialect. And if you have any problems, he gave 3 other men to help him out. Who are these 3 men? Zubair, Ulas, and Hisham. Take a look at who they are. They're the sons-in-law of Uthman. They have nothing to do. They're not scholars, but they have been married to his daughters, so he wants to keep it in the family. So they go and help Zayd ibn Thabit create this Qurayshi dialect, which is given to Uthman. And then Uthman, interestingly, does something different. What does he do after that? Do you remember what happens next? He takes all the other Qurans
and supposedly burn them.
Exactly.
I wonder how Yasser Qadhi feels about this.
Oh, Yasser Qadhi explains this, and so does Shabir Ali explain this. Yeah. He says these are nothing more than oral dialects.
He burned oral dialects?
How you burn oral dialects? Yeah. Burn someone's tongue? Burn the person? You can't burn orality. You have to burn text. You have to burn paper. You have to burn books. Am I correct?
Of course.
So obviously these must have been codexes, which are books. You have to burn books, which suggests to me that these books are in existence in Basra and Kufa and in Baghdad. Now that's not their name at that time. That's their name for today. And he was burning those so that they would not disagree with the Qurayshi dialect that he now has written in a consonantal text. Can you see there's a problem with this? Historically speaking, because how would you today know how to read the Arabic text in a written form different dialects in a written form.
You have to have diacritical markings
Diacritical marks. You need
in order
dots,
for you
right?
to know how to pronounce it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
In order to, you can speak it orally and hear it spoken differently. And I think Yasser Qadhi used the example of wa'a and water. See, that's only the difference is how you say it. Well, how you say it is different, but how would you write what you say in the text when you only have 16 consonants? And that's all they had was 16 consonants in the 7th century.
Right.
You can't. You have to have dama, kasra, and fatha to know between wa'a and water. And then you also have a ta versus a. So the ta would mean you would have to have 2 dots above it. Those dots didn't exist. That didn't exist in the 7th century. That was only introduced in the late 7th, 8th century, and really is really only canonized in the late 8th century, and could have only been introduced when these were being written. This guy right here, this is the first to have rewritten down with those different dots and vowels. And this is Ibn Amir, 736. That's 8th century.
Right.
Not 652. You can't have these oral, you might say, dialectical differences that early. So what did he burn then?
He obviously burned something that was written.
These have to be consonantal differences. Ooh, These are not vowelizations. This has nothing to do with diacritical marks. You can't burn texts that have different dialects that early. And this is where Dan Brubaker's coming into existence. Now we understand why they had so many differences in the consonantal text. That's for another time. Let's don't get into that. That's the biggest problem yet that I don't think Muslims have even understood yet or even tried to answer. But let's go on. So he does this, right? Now let's go. I want to show you another slide. Let's go back to the slides. Once he does this, he burns them all, and then he does this. Let's go to the next slide, because the next slide shows the sequence. Started with Muhammad. There he is. He dies in 632. Muhammad was given one Qur'an. All right? He was given one Qur'an, Qurayshi Qur'an, I assume. And if it's the Qurayshi Qur'an, it must be the eternal Qur'an. And the eternal Qur'an must be written in the Qurayshi dialect.
Right.
How can you have an eternal Qur'an written in the Qurayshi dialect when you don't have dots and vowels that early? Dots and vowels were written by men. So how can you even talk about a Qurayshi dialectical differences in heaven? Because in order to do that, you have to have dots and vowels again. Oh, I just love playing the Mickey, because you can see this is absolutely foolish when you Muslims make this kind of joke. But good old Muhammad, he realizes that not everybody can understand his Qurayshi speaking. So now we're talking about orality again. So he asked Jibril to give him 6 other dialectical differences so that his people who are coming to Medina and Mecca could understand what he was saying. So Jibril does that. And he gives Muhammad 6 different oral, let's just call it, they are oral because he hadn't written it down yet. He was still alive. That was not done until he died. Oral, different dialectical differences. Could Muhammad have understood those dialectical differences?
I doubt it.
Because where did those dialects come from?
They came from north.
Basra, Kufa, Damascus. Had Muhammad ever gone there and learned those dialects?
And even if he did, how come he did not indicate that it was revealed this way until Ibn Mujahid uncovered that hadith for us?
Exactly. So this is what I do, and this is what you all can do. Ask your Muslim friend. Okay, so he was given 7 by Ibn Jibril. What are those 7? Give me the names. Every Muslim I've asked that question to, they start, oh yeah, this is Nafi, Ibn Kathir, Abu Amr, Ibn Amir, Asim, Hamza, and Al-Qasai. I said, wait a minute. Those are the 7? Yes, those are the 7. Even Yasser Qadhi said that. He started referring to these 7. Those don't even begin to appear until 736.
That's right.
These are 8th century. You cannot use this at the time of Muhammad. These were not written down. They didn't even exist. These guys weren't even living at that time that wrote these down in those dialects. There was no way you could have had dialectical forms that early, and there's no way that Muhammad could have known those 7 dialects, even if he did, because he never went to those cities and lived there to learn the dialects. Nonetheless, can you see there's enormous problems here. So here's what's fascinating. Let's go to the next, go back to the slide again. We now have 7 Qur'ans, right? We're now up to 7 Qur'ans.
Right.
The Qurayshi plus 6 others.
Right.
Which are from Basra, Kufa, and Damascus, as the Muslims always tell me. Uthman then comes in and says, no, we've got to get it back to 1 because of all that happened up there in Azerbaijan. So he asked Zayd ibn Thabit to write it, and that has 114 surahs. You see the 114 I have up there? 114 surahs is Zayd ibn Thabit's. And we're told that it's this one here, the Hafstek. We'll get to that. Now, suddenly, there is a problem, because now you're back to 1 Quran again. From 7 back to 1.
Right.
All right? 7 back to 1. However, 5 copies of this 1 Quran are sent to 5 cities. Let's look at the 5 cities. Take a look at your screen. There's one. That is Yathrib, which is the archaic name for Medina.
Right.
One was sent down to Mecca, there in the south. I have them in green because this is the Qurayshi. When you see green, that's Qurayshi, just for this segment. And then one was sent there to Basra. One was sent up there to Kufa. And one was sent up there to Damascus. Are you seeing that on the map?
Right.
The problem is they must be Qurayshi. Oh, let's make sure they're green. Okay, so let's turn them to green. Bing, 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 bing. Now they're back to green again. So now you have 5 Qurayshi Qur'ans in 5 different cities with 5 different readers. We're told that these are 5 readers so that it would make sure that they would not pollute them, they would not change them, and never again have another Qur'an that's beside the Qurayshi Qur'an. Okay, this is what the traditions say. However, you got another problem. Because then suddenly 3 other Qur'ans start to appear. You have Ubay ibn Ka'b's Qur'an that appears in Damascus. He is one of the companions of the Prophet.
Right.
So he's even more important than Zayd ibn Thabit. Remember, Zayd ibn Thabit was just a little lad when Ubay ibn Ka'b, and this guy here, Ibn Masood, had already written 70 surahs.
And by the way, Ibn Masood has 111, some say 112 surahs. Ubay has 116.
Take a look at there. So
Yeah.
these are not 114s. These are completely different Qur'ans, aren't they?
Right.
And these are, take a look where they are. They're up in the north, in Damascus and in Kufa. That's in Syria and Iraq. So here you have Ubay ibn Ka'b with 116. He should have 114. That's not the same Qur'an. You have Ibn Masood, who has 111 surahs. That should be 114. That's too few. And they are not at all down here in Mecca, Medina. They're up in Syria and Iraq. And then you have a third one by Ibn Musa. And his is 114 surahs, so we're told. But can you notice the problem? Now suddenly those 3 at the top are no longer green, they're now red, which means these are not the same Qur'ans, and we're still in the 7th century.
Right.
We haven't even moved into the 8th century yet. So already you have a corruption going on in the north.
Right.
Up in the north again. Hold on a minute, I thought our good friend Uthman burned everything from the north. Evidently he didn't. Because you still have Ubay ibn Ka'b, Ibn Masood, and Ibn Musa, and they become very popular in those 3 cities.
Right.
Insurrection going on.
And it's obvious that that's the case.
That's the case. So that's the problem, all the problems I have with canon number 1. Let's now go to canon number 2. Now, before we go on, let me just put this thing. Notice they are all in the north and from the very cities whose Qur'ans were burned by Uthman earlier. Okay, now we get to canon number 2. What problems do we have here? Well, this is now the 8th century. We're moving into the 8th century, and now you have Uthman's Qurayshi in 622. Suddenly you have this Quran appearing by Ibn Amir from Damascus. Look at the date, 736, but his is not alone. Then you have Ibn Kathir, his is 738. He is from Mecca.
Right.
That would be Qurayshi, am I correct?
Yes. I mean, supposedly, because it's Mecca.
All right.
So one would argue that it is.
Now suddenly you have Asib ibn Abi al-Najud. His is from Kufa. That's Iraqi.
It is modern day Iraq.
745 is when he died. Then you have Abu Amr. Why don't you read their names as I put them up, because you know much better than
Abu
I.
Amr ibn al-Ala.
And he's 770. So now we're getting to the...
Al-A'la, I'm sorry. Ibn al-Ala.
And so he's getting ready towards the end of the 8th century. And then you have this guy.
And then you have Hamza.
Okay, and he's from Kufa again. Hold
That's
on a minute.
right.
Did we already get one from Kufa? Yeah, this is the second one from Kufa. Then we get this guy, Nafi.
Al-Madani.
He's
in
from
reference
Medina.
to Medina. Yeah.
785. And finally we get this guy, Al-Kasai, right? Again
Yes,
from
from
Kufa.
Kufa again, yeah.
So 3 from Kufa, 1 from Damascus, 2 from the Hijaz, which would be Medina and Mecca, and 1 from Basra. All right, fascinating. These are the 7 that Muslims always say existed at the time of Muhammad. No, they did not exist at the time of Muhammad. Look at their dates. 736 all the way to 805. That's the problem. Who's the guy that chose him? This guy chose him, Ibn Mujahid.
You
Look at
wonder
his dates.
why he decided only these out of all the readings that were available to him.
Out of about 700 that were available to him by the 10th century.
That's right.
Out of about 700, why did he choose these 7?
So it must be popularity also.
It's all to do with popularity. Who is the one that has the most
So
students?
the criteria he used, if I see that someone, a reader, have so many people who follow their style, then that must be canonized and must be revealed to Muhammad.
There you go.
He decided what was revealed to Muhammad based on number of followers.
Now, did he know Muhammad? Was he sitting at Muhammad's
course
feet?
not.
Did he live in that century? Did he even come from that area? Absolutely not on all three. He came from the 10th century, 300 years later. Now, let's go through and let's just look up Abdul Malik. I want to show you Abdul Malik again. This is the first Qira'at that appears is this guy here, and he is 44 years after. And then we look at this one here. I want to go up and show you one more. Let's look at the time that Uthman's Qurayshi, the one that was supposed to have been the canonical one from the last century. That's 84 years later that these others start to appear. 84 years after the canon was put in place, now you have 7 others that come up that are not part of that canon.
Right.
Okay? So that is canon number 2. I want to just put this one more, that Muhammad's death, it's 104 years after Muhammad's death. Now, I just want to bring up the Abbasids one more time. I keep on reminding you, this is all during the Abbasid period. Let's go to canon number 3. Boom, boom, boom. Canon number 3, now let's go up there. We've already talked about canon 2. There it is. Let's go and see what we have here. Following this, we have 7 designated readers. Al-Shatibi, is that how you pronounce it?
Shatibi, yeah.
In 1194 chose 14 rawat. And we're going to bring them all up here, the 14 rawat. There you are. Each one of those 7 readers is given 2. He had a good 700 he could have chosen from. He chose 2 for every one. What was his criteria? We talked about in the last episode.
Same thing.
Popularity.
It was popularity, and he's choosing 2 just to justify the transmission, basically.
Just to justify
almost
the
like
transmission.
a 2 eyewitness. To the reading, not to the person.
And the reason, you can see then there's another problem here. The guy named Warsh that we talked about earlier, he was not chosen for popularity. He was chosen for geography,
because I
where
want
he
people
lived.
to look at the dates. I mean, for instance, you have the reader in green. Look at the dates of those who are transmitting his material. They're not even his age or his time.
And a lot of them were not students that even lived at the time that
Exactly.
they're supposedly their stable leaders lived. Now, this is the guy that I'm looking at, because this one I've just circled in black. I want to look at him because he is the one that is the one we're using today. And he does not introduce his Quran for 144 years after Muhammad. Hugely important. And I can just say, let's bring up our good old friends. That's 164 years after Muhammad. And of course, they're all after the Abbasid period. I'm going to keep bringing it up. You'll see how I'm going to bring towards the end of all these episodes. Now we get to canon 4. We already have now 21 qira'ats. If that's not bad enough, you have our good friend, good old man. His name is Al-Jazari. He is in the 15th century, and he chooses another 9. 3 readers, isn't that interesting? You brought this up before. Why is that important? Because the 3 readers, along with the 7,
makes it 10, and supposedly those are canonized. There is another tradition that added 4 more, made them 14, and then they decided anything beyond that is heretical. Well, who get to decide what is heretical and what is not?
Well, Al-Jazari is considered to be the scholar of all scholars. He is the one that is always the father of all the qira'at. And look at his date. It's 1429. He made this decision. 1429 to make it and aggrandize it, bring it up to 30. So now you have 30. You have 7 plus 14 plus 3 plus 6. That makes 30 in my count. 30 official Qurans. They're all there up on the screen. 30 of them. But that's the 4th canonization. We want to just show that that's a good 797 years. Roughly, we're talking about 800 years. All of them coming after the Abbasids. Now we come to canon number 5. And canon number 5 is from 7 to 21 up to 30. Then we have to come back down to 1 again. And this is why I want to make it visual so people see why we're talking about
Exactly.
this. You're not good enough with 30 because obviously you cannot have standardized tests, so you've got to bring them back to 1. So they bring it back to this one here, the Hafs, that's circled in black. There he is. What is that? Well, 1 official Quran chosen 96 years ago. Interestingly, only chosen in Cairo. They have to then, for all of Egypt, that is the Farouk edition. That was chosen in 1936. But that's still not good enough, because if you want it for the whole world, then you have to go to King Fahd, who then chose this Quran in 1985. Why was Hafs chosen? Do you know the reason?
If I want to take a wild guess, we're talking again about probably popularity contest.
Well, no, in this case it was a popularity contest. The reason that Muhammad Ibn Ali Husaini al-Haddad chose him in 1924 is because the Ottomans liked him. He was chosen by the Ottomans, who come into power in 1299. So that's the 13th century.
So he was popular among the Ottomans.
There you go. And why did the Ottomans choose him? Because he comes close to where they lived. They live up in Turkey. They wanted one that was from Iraq, and so they chose Hafs because he was very easy to read. Fascinating.
The NIV of the Qur'an.
That's right. They had nothing to do with textual criticism. It had nothing to do with manuscript, textual, looking at a manuscript. It didn't look at any of the Topkapi, the Samarkand Mahil, the Husseini, the Petropolitanus, or the Sanaa manuscript. Any of the 6 major manuscripts, we don't know of any reference of any of these manuscripts they looked at.
Take the 1924 Cairo edition, look at the introduction, and show me which manuscript did they reference.
That's right. They can't. So what do? Well, you can see that all of these, as you're going up on the screen, all of these that are being chosen are chosen 2 to 3 to 800 years after the fact. And I've never heard any Muslim talk about this. And that's why we have to put it on a timeline. Do they see how stupid this sounds in public when you say that these were all existing at the time of Muhammad, and that Muhammad knew all of these, and these guys were there, these dialects were given to Muhammad, that these are nothing more than dialectical differences, and there's no difference as far as doctrine, there's no difference as far as practice, there's no difference as far as meaning. They all say the same thing. No, they do not. We did a show a number of months ago where we just unpacked a few of them, and we looked at chapter 98, verse 6, and good old Shabir Ali took an hour and a half to try to refute you just with one verse. One verse, we found 93,000. Does he want to take an hour and a half on all 93,000? Have any of them looked at the 93,000 differences between the ones you see on the screen right here? How many Muslims have even known that? How many Muslims even know how many differences? It was our group.
That a whole lot of them know anything about this.
It was our group in London that found out the 93, and that's just looking at 23 of the 30 that we have accessible.
That's why I feel bad for my people, my Muslim people, because unfortunately they don't know about these things, and when these facts come out, you have babblers like Yasser Qadhi who come and attack without even any knowledge.
Not one word, not one letter different. Right. Every one of these is different. That's why you have the different names. If they were all the same, all you would do is just choose one of them. Say, we don't need the others. Why do you think you need 30 of them? Because all 30 of them were different. And this is what you do. Each family, you know this, each family chooses, usually they choose whatever is popular in their area. For instance, we know that this one here, the Wats that we talked about earlier, this is very popular in North Africa.
Right.
And that's why they memorize this one in North Africa. All around the rest of the world, they memorize this one.
That's correct.
There are 5,000 differences between these two books right here.
That's right.
If you're going to memorize the Quran, and you spend all your life memorizing it in the Warsh dialect, and then suddenly you come back to England or United States and you see that there's only this one here, you're going to have a problem because you're going to be missing 5,000 words.
And which one is preserved right now in the tablets in heaven?
Which one of these 5,000 differences? Yeah. Then that's why you can still buy them today. That's why you can get them on the internet, because they sell them to different families from different parts of the world who want to make sure that they have a tajweed. They call it a tajweed in their dialect.
Right.
Written down, yes, we know they're written down, and that's why they're so different, and that's why you cannot destroy them, because you dare not destroy them, because all these families, hundreds of families, thousands of families all over the world memorize it differently than the others, and they have not been told that the next door neighbors have it completely different Quran. Now, before we finish, I have 2 more slides to show.
Right. Because
I want to show you what then this north-south divide. Notice this, what we call north dominance. Mecca, 3 qira'ats come from Mecca. Do you see that there? How about Medina? 5 of these qira'ats, 5 of these different Qurans, these Arabic Qurans, come from Medina. Take a look here. Cairo, just 1 comes from Cairo. That's the watch that we talked about. Damascus, 3 qira'ats come from Damascus. Basra has 6 qira'ats come from Basra. And Kufa, double that number, 12. Why do you think? Just try to guess. You probably don't know the reason, but why would you think so many come from Kufa?
It could be that the authority at that time favored maybe Kufa because of existence of schools or
exactly
something related to that.
What schools especially? And see, this is what's interesting. What we now know is that Kufa was the seat of many of the seminaries for the Jews and the Christians, and also the emerging Muslims. Because remember, these are 8th century now. We're talking about 8th century up in 9th century, up until the 10th century, all the way from 736 up to 905. 8th, 9th, and 10th century, you have all these different qira'ats coming in. And the majority of them are in Basra and Kufa, which, especially Kufa, 12 of them from Kufa alone, because that is where these schools are. They're having all these discussions with the Jews and Christians. Take a look at the Quran. Have you noticed how many discussions, how many theological points there within the Quran? That now shows you how that the Quran was created at this time, much later in the 8th century,
right.
And these discussions are incorporated into the Quran, and that's where they had access to these stories. These apocryphal writings, maybe Dr. John Wansborough said this in the 1970s, these apocryphal writings that you see in chapter 5, and chapter 21, and chapter 27 don't make sense because none of these writings would have been down in Mecca and Medina. There were no Jews in Mecca and Medina. None of this apocryphal account would have existed in Mecca and Medina to have these stories incorporated. You had to be up in Kufa, he said. You had to be in Basra. Take a look and see where these Qurans are being written. In the very place where the Jews were throwing out these stories that they didn't believe were authoritative, but they were giving them as basically nothing more than children's tales about these different biblical characters. That's why the Quran is full of these stories.
Right.
Now can you see why all of this takes place in the north? More than that, let's just look at all of the 30 qira'ats, 8 of them from the Hijaz, 22 of them are from what we know as Iraq and Syria. Today's Hafs is also from Kufa, which is Iraq. The conclusion, a minority of the Qurans originated in Mecca and Medina, while the majority were too far to the north. All of these northern areas, except Cairo, are where the Abbasids originated. You're going to get tired of me saying the Abbasid. You'll see why later on. Can you then understand why we're saying this? This is hugely significant. And that's why, folks, you need to look at the maps. You need to look at the timelines. When you see the timelines, when you look at the maps, you realize there is a real problem that Islam has not even dealt with. They've got to deal with this north dominance. They've got to deal with the fact that almost all of these start to appear in the 8th, 9th, and 10th century. They do not come from the 7th century, and certainly this one comes from 796, the late 8th century. You've got to start admitting this, Muslims, and you've got to start dealing with this. Proving to me that none of these come from Muhammad, and none of these come from heaven, and none of these come from Uthman.
Amen to that. So hopefully everyone is enjoying the series, enjoying the data that we are sharing with you. You can see now why we're asking these serious questions. Indeed, where is Muhammad, the real Muhammad? And if the sources that are telling us about him, starting with the Quran, have that many problems, then we have every right to ask questions like this about the Quran, the origin of the Quran, about the Qibla and the direction of the Qibla, and about Muhammad and the real Muhammad indeed, whether he was from Mecca or whether he was somewhere from another part, geographically speaking, which I don't want to get into right now until we get to that section in this particular series. Dr. J, as always, thank you so much for these amazing information that you're sharing with us, and hopefully everyone will be able to share this also with others, whether on YouTube, Facebook, or any other social media platforms. Thank you. Until next time, have a blessed day.